Holocaust Museum, which I recommend you go to, but it's kind of gross, so if you're not familiar with all the dead bodies, but they have a way of showing the bad stuff, and they have a gate so young people can't see it. So if you're older and tall enough, you can then look down and see the film. So they try not to make young kids sick and give them nightmares. So, and that's a problem. But anyways, the Holocaust Museum, they created a book called Deadly Medicine, Creating the Master Race. And if I wrote the book myself, I could not have done a better job. This showed that racism, Darwinism, was the background behind the Holocaust, clearly. And as I read the book, and I was astounded, they did such a good job, even though it's not politically correct. But if I would have written the book, I would not change one single word. It was that good. I was astounded at how good it was. And the last time I presented this, somebody asked me for the title again, and I slipped. So if you look online on Deadly Medicine, you should be able to find the book. It's a big, beautiful book with lots of photographs in it, color photographs. It's kind of expensive, $40 or $50, but on the other hand, it really shows that Darwinism was a chief cause of the Holocaust. Now, it's hard to say but. You can't really say, well, if Darwin was never born, this wouldn't have happened, because people say, well, somebody else would have come up with the idea. Well, that's possible, but they say that with Hitler. Well, if Hitler was never born, somebody else would have done what he did. Well, it's hard to rewrite history, but nonetheless, I believe that certainly the Darwinian ideas were critical in developing the Holocaust, and this has been well documented. And this compilation basically is based on the exhibition, which was traveled throughout the number of museums throughout the country. And they quoted internationally recognized authorities on Nazism, which document that the scientific establishment was critical in planning and carrying out the Holocaust. Okay, now it wasn't scientists per se, it was the scientific ideas of eugenics, specifically Darwinian eugenics, that has carried out the Holocaust. And this is only one of many examples, which I focus on because, of course, when you go to a bookstore, you have any halfprice.com bookstores around here? But that's one of the best bookstores to go to. There's one in Toledo. There's none in Toledo. There's one in Fort Wayne. Then there's a couple in Indianapolis and Cincinnati and Columbus. So in the whole state, there might be 5 or 6 of the bookstores. But if you go there, they'll have 3 or 4 books on the Civil War. They'll have maybe 5 books on World War I. They'll have maybe 3 books on the Korean War, and 9 shelves of books on World War II and the Holocaust. It's amazing the number of books that are published and the popularity of books on the Holocaust. And it's hard to say why that's true. I think probably part of it is that most of us are German background. How many of you have at least a grandparent that was German? Raise your hand. See, over half of you are primarily German background. How many here are Slavic, Polish? Or you look kind of Germanic. And that's a problem, by the way. They'd look at you and they'd say, you look Germanic, you don't look Polish. And so therefore, that's a problem they had. And so what they did was thousands of Poles, they became appointed as Germans. And that really shows how ludicrous it was, because there were so many Poles that just didn't have the traits of a Pole. The last time I gave this talk, I talked to a fellow. He said, I'm 100% Polish. My families are 100% Polish. My father served in the German army. Well, how did that work? Well, he looked German enough, so they drafted him. And this is based on race. Yeah, right. Foolishness. And that's the cover of the book, Deadly Medicine, Creating the Master Race. It's a compelling visual documentation of the effect of Darwinism on the Holocaust and on the other atrocities that the Germans committed. And there are, of course, famous pictures of Adolf Hitler. And by the way, when we talk about Germanic race, blonde hair, blue eyes, you notice? The rumor is, and I cover this in my book, the rumor is that Hitler's mother worked as a maid for the Rothschild. The rumor is that Hitler's father was actually a Rothschild. The famous Rothschild family. And so that has not been confirmed, but there are some indications doing some analysis. And again, this is getting into speculation, but that indeed he did have a Jewish father. But we assume he hated Jews. He really didn't. He had a number of friends, and I talk about this in one of my newest books. He had a number of good friends that were Jewish. He was given the Iron Cross by his commander, who was Jewish. His mother's doctor was Jewish. And when the wars against the Jews started, he made it very clear, you are not to touch my mother's doctor. He is not to be affected adversely in any way. He's to be protected. He was Jewish. So there were certain Jews, and there's a famous saying, and I'm not sure who said it, but a famous saying that Hitler might have said, I will determine who is a Jew. Which, again, stresses the difficulty of these racist ideas. Today it's hard for us to understand, I think, how in the world they had these ideas, how in the world they could accept this racist worldview, but they did. Of course, I wonder how in the world scientists can accept Darwinism. It's just phenomenal. When I present the evidence against Darwinism, that's the main question people ask. How in the world do people buy this idea? How could they accept the Darwinian idea that you are the result, which is what Darwin teaches, you're the result of billions of mistakes? Do you buy that? Of course, that's ludicrous. I've made mistakes in my life, and I'll tell you, they're not always, in fact, they're usually not beneficial. Mistakes are mistakes. They're usually harmful. And we know that 99% of all mutations are harmful or near neutral. Near neutral means they don't kill you, but they add up. And they eventually cause a problem like cancer. Cancer is the result of a number of mutations. And so therefore, when you explain evolution in that way, well, of course, all life would be the result of mutations and mistakes. Dogs, cats, people, everything. And you wonder how people could accept that idea. Well, when you put it in those terms, it's hard to accept.